Today, I want to talk to you about internal networking. What do I mean by internal networking? Simply networking inside your current company or organization. And you're probably sitting there going, well, why would I be networking with the company I already work for if I'm trying to find a new job? I would probably network with people outside my company. But we're going to talk a little bit today about people who are in a position where they don't necessarily want to leave the organization, and they're actually trying to either find a new job or get promoted or just become more recognized for the work they do within their organization. And it's very similar to all the other types of networking. And when I say other types, I just mean external networking. It's similar to any networking you do, I guess I would say, in that the process is the same. And actually, networking inside of your company may be easier than meeting people in other companies. So let's talk about why you would do this. Why would you need to network internally? And the biggest reason is, number one, recognition for your accomplishments. And number two, career mobility. If you want to get promoted within a company, you want to get a new job, you want to move up to a better role or a bigger role and make more money, you're going to need to have people know who you are. It sounds, like not really fair, but it really comes down to people want to work with people they know. And if a leader in another part of the organization doesn't know who you are or know what you can do, they're probably not going to put you at the top of the list to be promoted or to move into a role in their part of the organization. And I think a lot of people fall into this trap. They think that if they work for a company and a new position comes open and they apply for that position, that they'll automatically get considered for it. But you may be one of many people who's trying to get in this position and one of many people who works for the company already. So how are you going to set yourself apart? And that's where internal networking comes in. And one mistake I made early in my career, and a lot of people make this mistake, and I was actually reading a post by someone who I know on LinkedIn named Emma May. And Emma is a branding expert. She helps people use LinkedIn, helps them develop their personal brand. And she actually shared a story about a client of hers who got bypassed for a promotion because the leader didn't know who the person was. The person did a great job. He got good results. He got praised. He got good reviews, but nobody else outside of his team really knew who he was. And he hadn't really done any internal networking. And that kind of got me thinking about this. And another conversation that I had a couple of weeks ago was with a group of people at my company asking me how they get promoted. And the biggest thing, I was there talking to them about something related to compensation, but the real thing they want to know is, how am I going to get a bigger job? And they all expressed a little bit of frustration, but the point was, many of them had never done anything outside of their team. Nobody outside of their team knew who they were. So when they go to apply for a job, it's just like anybody off the street applying. All you see is like a resume or some sort of profile, and that's all anybody has to go on. But if you network internally, you're more likely to have an opportunity to find out about these jobs, maybe before they're even posted, but you're going to put yourself in a better position to be considered for them. And as I was saying, there was a mistake I made early in my career, and that was having a mindset that my work would speak for itself. I thought if I showed up and I did a great job and I got high reviews, people would notice that. And of course, my boss noticed that, and maybe my boss's boss noticed that. But outside of that, people didn't know who I was or what I did. And there's a lot of other people in the organization who are doing a lot of good work. And if you don't do something to let people know who you are, what you're working on, they're not going to be able to they're only going to go with the people they know, right? So if there's somebody else who's sharing what they're doing, having conversations, building relationships, then they're going to be the ones that get considered for other opportunities. And this doesn't mean that you have to go around the organization bragging or overly self-promoting yourself, but it does mean that you're going to have to focus on building some relationships with people in the organization outside of your immediate team and your manager. And as you do this, you'll start to build your own personal brand within the company, and people will get to know you, and they'll figure out what you're known for. And this isn't just like your job and your skills. It's how do you deliver the work? What kind of person are you? Because besides just having the experience for a job, people want to work with somebody that they feel like they know and trust. And in order to get to that point, you're going to have to build a relationship with them. And like I said, this is very similar to what you would do if you were networking externally. You would follow basically the same process with a few things that are a little bit different. And so I want to talk to you a little bit more about the process and give you some ideas today on how to network internally, how to think about it, how to approach it. And actually, I have another one. I have 2 ways to do it, and then I have one way that you could try, but it's not my favorite, and we'll get to that later. But the first thing you need to do, as with any networking, is figure out who do you want to connect with, right? And I talk about that all the time. I always say start with whoever you know, and this is the point where it gets to be easier to do this internally in your organization because you already have something in common with the person you want to network with. That's you work at the same place. So right away, they are probably going to be more likely to talk to somebody that already works in the same place compared to somebody who, they don't know that's hitting them up on LinkedIn. So right away, you have a little bit easier road figuring out who to connect with. And you also know who the people are and what they do. So you can look around the org and say, okay, I'm interested in a job in this department. And who's the leader of that department? And that would be the person you'd want to network with, or somebody who is a leader in that department. So right away, again, the first step that I would always tell anybody in any networking is figure out who you already know or who you want to know and connect with, and start there by kind of making a list. So you have a list of people who you'd like to connect with. And how do you figure this out within your organization? Like I said, it could be because you're interested in a different department, or you're interested in a different part of the company, what they do. And you might pick those leaders. It might just be you want to talk to the leaders of the company, maybe one of the executives. And I would recommend you stay away from trying to connect with a CEO unless the CEO is somebody who's really, really available, because the CEO usually has the busiest schedule. They're the hardest person to get in touch with, and it's going to be hard to schedule time with them. So maybe pick somebody who reports to the CEO. Maybe the next level down is somebody you want to connect with. So those, you can go for the executives. You can go with department heads if you work in a big organization, or you can look at people in the org who do interesting things. And what I mean by that is a lot of companies have groups that volunteer, do community service, do employee, they lead employee resource groups. Those are people who, they might be doing something that really connects with you, something that you're really into, and, you're really aligned with those values, and it's something you want to get involved with. Those are good people to connect with through those activities. So pick an activity that somebody's doing. It's somebody who you admire, somebody who you'd like to get to know, somebody who you'd want to have a relationship with, somebody who you think would be helpful in the future for your career mobility, and find something in common with them. So again, this is kind of, again, just like you would do if you're networking externally, you'd find somebody who you wanted to get to know, something in common with them, and then that would be somebody you'd try to connect with. So again, think about that in terms of your organization. Who are those leaders? Maybe they're the top leaders. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're just the leader of a different team. Maybe they work on something interesting or something that aligns with your values. Or lastly, here's another thing. If you know what job you want or where you want to work, find somebody who's already moved into that role. Find somebody who's walked the path before you. Find somebody who you could talk to and basically ask, hey, how did you make the transition into this role? And that's a good way to, again, connect with somebody who's already been where you're trying to go. And when you do that, most people are likely to want to share their experience and share how they did it with people. So, don't be afraid to connect with those people. So that's several different people you could connect with within your organization. Now, how do you do this? Well, you could very simply ask them for some time. That's again what you would do. And again, let's go back to the way I always tell people: after you know who you want to connect with, right? Then you're going to make sort of an online connection, and then you're going to move to an in-person conversation. So once you know who, and again, this is easier within your organization. This is why it's easier to do this internally, because you're going to be able to send an email to this person and introduce yourself. And number one, they already know you work in the org. Maybe they don't know your name, but they see the email address and it's from inside their org. So it's not a vendor. It's not somebody cold calling on them. It's just somebody in the org. So you already have an advantage there. You're going to send them an email and ask them if you can have 15 minutes of their time to ask them one question. And you can play around with the one question. The reason why I say 15 minutes is that's a low amount of time. Most people can find 15 minutes. And also just tell them you're going to ask them one question. That way, this doesn't sound like it's going to be a big interview or a big imposition on their time. And what I use and what I have used, and I'm going to tell you the process I went through, and you can use this or tweak it for you. But what I use is I ask the question, what do you think was the number one factor in your success? Or what's the one thing that contributed to your career success? Okay, so let me set this up. Here's what I did. Several years ago, I was working in a company and I was trying to do this. I had this idea for internal networking, and I picked 5 executives who reported to the CEO. Not the CEO again, but 5 executives who reported to the CEO. And I sent them each an email and I said, hey, my name's Greg. I work in the property operations department for my supervisor. I put my supervisor's name. And I am working on a personal development project. And my personal development project is to talk to leaders in the org to understand what one thing contributed the most to their success. So I would love to talk to you for 15 minutes and ask you one question. What is the number one thing that you think contributed to your success? That's all. And I sent them the email. Now, you can mess with the email. You can do it differently than that. That's not exactly how you have to do it. But that's how I did it. And every one of those 5 responded and said, sounds good, set up time on my calendar. So I worked with their executive assistants because, again, these were all executives. And so they had somebody schedule their calendar. And I had 15 minutes with them. And now I did this in person. We were all in the office, but you could do this on the phone or by video or some other way. And I was very flexible. Some of them couldn't do it for a few weeks. Don't worry about it. Don't be in a big hurry with it. But I went in and I sat down with each of them and I asked each one of them that question. And they all answered the question. And then they said, tell me more about what you're doing. So I told them, again, this is a personal development project. I'm just trying to identify, key similarities in success and how to become successful in my job, in my career. They also basically said, most of them all said, well, what are you working on now? And I told them what department I was in, what projects I was working on, how those things worked. And it turned into a conversation. So the simple question asking them, again, whenever you get in a networking conversation, your first move is to ask people about themselves. And so I was asking them what made them successful. They told me, and then we started having a conversation, and it went back and forth. And I learned about what they were working on, what they were doing, and they learned what I was working on. And it turned into becoming the start of a relationship with these individuals. Now, of course, coming out of this, I, had to stay in touch. I had to say hello to them. I had to be, very professional around them. But this was the sort of the opening the door. And so a couple things I want to point out that you want to make sure you do. Ask for the meeting through kind of how I explained it. And then also when you get in the meeting, listen to what they say. And if they give you any advice, go act on it, go try it out, and then report back to them. That's a good way to follow up. If they don't give you any advice and you just keep talking, they might say something like, well, what is it you want to do? So this is kind of you have to be a little bit prepared going into this. Of course, you want to ask you a question, but you're going to need to be ready if they say like, well, what is it you hope to achieve? Or what would you like to do? Or how do you contribute here? Be ready for that and give a good, strong answer about who you are and how you do it. So, go where the conversation leads. And if it doesn't really go anywhere after you leave, that's fine. Send them a thank you. Say, hey, it was great talking to you. I really learned a lot. Always happy to talk and let me know if I can ever help you in any way. And then, you kind of establish that relationship from there. So is that going to mean you're going to get promoted tomorrow? No, it's not. But it's going to give you a start to get to know some people who are going to know you. And as they know you and you start to talk to them, they might become somebody who you can reach out to on a more regular basis. You have to kind of see how the conversation goes. Don't be manipulative of their time. Don't try to take all their time. Don't bug them all the time. Be very, very considerate of it. But again, try to check in, try to build that relationship. And like I said, is this going to get you a job right away? No, not necessarily. But when it comes time for people to talk about talent in the organization and these people are in the room and your name comes up, they're going to say, oh yeah, I know Greg. I had a good conversation with him. He's an interesting guy. I think he's got a future here. Or, they'll say something like that. And then when positions come up, you're going to kind of stand out from the rest of the pack. So again, follow the same sort of steps for this that you would with any sort of networking meeting. But again, like I said, internally, it actually can be easier. You already know them. You're somebody that is kind of known to them. At least you're not somebody outside, so they don't have to have their guard up. You can have a simple conversation with them. You'll probably see them again. The follow-up's not that difficult. And, if nothing else comes from this, you're getting to practice your networking conversations in a very low-risk environment. So do this to practice networking. If you're not looking for a job, if you're not trying to find something new, then do this to practice those networking conversations so that when you're already ready to go. And the added benefit is you might put yourself in the position to be recognized as a potential high performer or top talent in your organization, as somebody that should be considered for future opportunities. So there's really like no downside to this, but approach it with curiosity, approach it with professionalism, approach it with an open mind, and you really have a good opportunity. And the last thing is, nobody else will be doing this. You will definitely be setting yourself apart in your organization if you are the person that does the internal networking. I hope those helped. I hope those tips helped. Try it out. I would love to hear somebody who does this. Tell me how it goes, if it's working or it's not working. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast and the newsletter, the YouTube channel. I'm here every week, and I'm here to help you become a better networker. So until next time, go out there, connect with some people, have a great week, and I'll talk to you next week.